Welcome to today's tutorial. And in today's tutorial, we are going to be looking at something very important as we continue our systematic exploration of the Power BI desktop. In our previous class, we ended with how to merge data or how to merge queries in Power BI. But in today's class, we're going to be looking at how to append queries in Power BI. How to append queries in Power BI. What does it mean to append queries? Appending queries allow you to combine tables that share the same column structure and data type. That is, if you have two or more tables that have the same column structure and data type, you can combine them together. That's what we call appending. What appending actually does is that it adds rows to the existing tables. Let me illustrate this. To illustrate this effectively, I'd like us to take a look at the following tables. If you go to our Power BI class folder, you will notice that inside the folder, we have AdventureWorks raw data, which we have been using in our exercise. Then inside the AdventureWorks folder, you will see sales data. Sales data. If you open this sales data folder, you will see sales for 2020, sales for 2021, and sales for 2022. So from what we have here, the sales that happened in 2020, we have it here. The sales that happened in 2021, we have it here. And 2022. We may have 2023, 2024. We can also have the previous ones like 2019, 2018, 2017, and as the case may be. Now, if this data set were gathered separately by year, if a need may arise that will warrant us to combine these three data sets together to become one, to combine these three data sets together to become one, that's what when we use appending. Now, a very good example is when you collect data on a particular issue over a period of time or in different locations. A good example can be the normal INEC voters registration. Now, you notice that registration goes on in every ward. Now, after the ward, the names will be collected at the local government level. Then, after local government, they will bring local governments together to get the data for one state. After the state, they can collect them together to combine them as one data set. INEC does that. So in that case, or in this situation, we use appending to combine more than one table together. But what happens when you are appending query is that it simply adds rows to an existing table. Let's open Adventure Says 2020. We'll open 2020 and we look at the structure of the table, because there are two major conditions that makes appending possible. We can look at this now. In this 2020, we have order dates, we have stock dates, and we have order number, we have product key, we have customer key, we have territory key, we have order line item, and we have order quantity. So you have the date the order was made, the stock date, and the rest of them. We have the customer key. That is the customer that purchased it. We have the product key, the product that was purchased. We have the customer key, the customer that purchased it. We have the territory key. Each territories are represented by keys, just as each customer is represented by a key and each product, so on. Now, this is for Adventure Works Sales 2020. If we minimize this and open 2021, you will notice that 2021 also have the same structure. Look at it. It has the same structure with 2020. You can see that in 2020, we had these column headers. These are called column headers. If you also go ahead and minimize to open 2022, you will notice that they have the same structure. So for you to append two or more queries together, number one, they must have the same column structure, and number two, they must also have the same data type. That is, the kind of data that is entering in this column is the same as the kind of data entering in this column, and the same as the kind of data entering in each of the columns in the other tables. So having understood this now, we want to combine 2020, 2021, and 2022 quickly. To do this, we will open our Power BI and connect the three tables first of all. We want to connect the three tables. So to connect the three tables, what we'll simply do is normal. We go to our Home tab, we go to our Transform tab, click on Transform, then before we go to Transform, because we can connect from Transform, we'll click on, but if we don't want to connect from Transform, we can decide to connect from Get Data. Let's click on Get Data first. We'll click on Get Data, and we navigate to Files. We'll select Text to CSV, and we click on Connect. Then we open navigate at the folder and go to Sales Data. Let's connect to 2020 first. That opens us up to the query editor. Now we click Transform Data, and we are now in query editor. The next is, from here we can go ahead using new source to connect to the rest of the data. Let's, for instance, connect the second one. We can connect Adventure Works 2021. Let us practice to combine the two of them together. We'll click on Open. And when it opens, now we have our two queries together. I click OK. You have the two queries now. Let me edit the names. Let me call this Sales 2020. And let me call this cell 2021, just the two of them. Now we have the two of them. So what next do we do? We have 2020. You can now see the columns, the column headers. See 2021. See the column headers that are the same. And the data type must also be the same. Now, to proceed now, we want to combine 2021 into 2020. So we can select 2020. And once we do that, then from the home tab at the extreme right, you will see merge queries, you will see append queries. You click on the drop down arrow beside append queries, and you will notice two options, append queries and append queries as new. If you choose append queries, it will append the two queries together and make them one. If you choose append queries as new, it will leave these two alone and append the queries. It will leave the two alone and append the two queries for you as we move on. So we will choose append queries. I will select append queries as new. And once we select append queries as new, you will notice that two tables are selected. If you want to only append two tables, you select two tables. If it's going to be three or more tables, you select this. But because we want to append two tables for now, we'll select this, and you will see the first table has been selected already. Because we selected it here, so it's already showing here. Then, to select the second table, we'll click on this drop-down arrow and select 2021. And once we do that, we click OK. And as soon as we click OK, you will notice that append one will appear here. Remember what we selected is append query as new. So it combined the two tables as a new table here for us. And we can now rename it as combined tables. And now we'll rename the combined tables. You will now notice that the two tables are involved here now. And if you scroll down, you will notice that the two tables are presently combined together. That is how to append tables together in Power BI. So if you have tables from different local governments or tables from different locations where a particular job went on, or tables from different years, depending on how data is collected, you can append them together to make one. Or if an exercise is taking place in various places, and at the end of it, you want to collect all of them together, this is what you do. You use the append query to do this. I'd like you to pause the video and briefly go through what I've just shown you now. Then remember that we have the data sets used in this class in the description section of our previous lectures and even in this present lecture. So try to practice it, master it, understand it as we move on. The next thing we're going to look at in this tutorial is refreshing queries. Refreshing queries. How to refresh queries. Now, if you look at, we have three queries now. The first query, the second query, and the third query. Now, if you look at the home tab, and you go to the ribbon, you will see a command, refresh preview. You click on the drop down arrow, you will notice refresh preview, refresh all. Now this command is used to refresh your queries. What does it mean to refresh your query? Now refreshing queries simply talks about a situation when you have a query connected to the query editor, as we have these three queries now connected to the query editor. And there is a change in the source. Let me give an illustration. Let me open Microsoft Excel briefly, and we will illustrate it from there. If I have this Microsoft Excel and I open a new document of Microsoft Excel, now this is names. And this is, I can say, city. And I can say age. And if I have Iken as the first name, from city, Oka, age 23. And I have Emeka. Emeka is from Benin and is 45 years. And I have Uche. Uche is from Lagos and age is 78. Now, I want to save this table on the desktop. So I save this on my desktop as my data on the desktop. This is an Excel file saved on the desktop. So I open my Power BI and I want to connect to that, my data. I click on new source. I will now navigate to, because it's an Excel file, as a left Excel workbook, and I connect. I will now navigate to the desktop and look for that data set, my data, and click on open. The connection process will begin. And once the connection is done, I will see the table here as sheet 1. Remember that it is sheet 1 here. So I will see it as sheet 1. Then I will go ahead and select it. You will see the preview, and I click on OK to connect to it. Now I've connected to the table, so you can now see sheet 1. I can decide to rename it as data table. That is what I chose to rename it as. And now I have this table here now, data table. Remember that this data is from a particular source. Now, if I decide to go back to that source, remember I have 3 items here, Ikenna, Emeka, and Uche. If I go back to the source back again, and I decide to add extra 2 names, I want to add Ken. Ken from the source now. Ken is from Aba and is 67 years. And I have Emenike. Emenike is from Owerri and is 54 years. I've just added 2 rows now, this and this. I will save the data simply. Then remember that I will have to update this. I'll have to update the one in Power BI. What do I do? I don't need to perform a fresh connection. All I need to do is either I come to this particular Power Query, I click on Home, and I go to refresh, and if I want to refresh all the queries, I will choose refresh all. But if I want to refresh this particular one that is open, active now, I will choose refresh preview. So as soon as I hit refresh preview, you will notice that the two names are added in the source as updated now. So that is what it means to refresh query. So you can be performing an analysis with data connected to a particular source. But if there are more additions to the data set, all you need to do is to refresh. So if it's data from the cloud, it can be data from the cloud. And as people keep registering, each day you come, open your Power BI, you refresh. And once you refresh, you will notice that the data will be updated this way. Assuming I decide to click on refresh all, you will notice that all the table will have been refreshed. That's exactly what happens. I can also come to the queries here, right click on the query, and eventually select include in report refresh. Now you can see this is checked. Assuming I don't want a particular table to undergo refreshing, what I simply do is I right click on it, come here and uncheck this. And once I uncheck this, it means that from now, you can notice that it's not checked now. So from now, this table will not refresh again. If I come to this data set now, and let me add Amaka, and I click, Amaka is from Oguta, and Amaka is 23 years also. Once I save this, if I go back to my Power BI and I choose refresh preview, you will notice that Amaka gets refreshed again. Now, the reason why Amaka gets refreshed is because an addition has been made. But generally, we will go on to look at it closely to be able to understand more about this refreshing. I believe that is very clear to us. I'd like you to pause the video and take time to create a data set yourself in Excel, connect to Power BI, and try to add more data to the source and refresh in Power BI to see how the reactions will be. Now let us look at what I call in Power BI data source setting. Data source settings. Data source settings. Now remember that we have these queries connected from a data set on our desktop. Look at, if I minimize this, you will notice that we have our data source here. We have this as a data source. We have this is where we connected to. And the next data source we have is this, my data. These are our data source. Now, I would like us to illustrate with this now. This, my data, is a data source for this particular query that is here. Now, if you click on the Home tab and you go to the ribbons, you will notice a command, data source settings. This command enables us to set our data source. If you click on it, you will see data source in current files. You will see all the data sources in current files. Now, what happens is that whenever you make a connection to a file in your computer, just as we've done now, Power BI will basically take a snapshot of that exact file path. Every file connected to Power BI has a file path. A file path. That is, the file might be located on the desktop or inside a folder or inside document folder or inside any location, or it can be a file from the cloud. What Power BI does is that it takes a snapshot of that exact file path and the name. Two things are very important: the file path and the name of the file. Power BI takes a snapshot of it. Now, this means that if any changes about the file is made, that is, if you change the file location or you change the name of the file, that path will not automatically update. That path will not automatically update. What you will need to do is to go into the data source setting. You come to this environment, then you have to make some changes. Now, what are the kind of changes? Let me show you one good example, because without example, you will not understand it. This data set is data table, right? It is connected. Now, despite the fact that I change the name here, it doesn't change the original name. If you want to know the original name of this file, or these files, you go to data source setting. You will notice that the first one, my data is on the desktop, inside the folder user, inside users, inside C. Notice that AdventureWorks says data 2020 is inside a folder Power BI class, inside the desktop and the rest of them. These are the paths. Even if you change the name here, the path here does not change, because this is the pathway through which it connected to the data. That is why it is called connection. Now, what about if I minimize and I come to this, my data, right-click on it and change the name? Maybe I'll have to close these files so I can change the names. Let me close this. I have to close the Excel files so that I can illustrate this way. Okay. Then look at this now. I right-click on it and go to rename. And I want to rename it as my data 2. I've renamed it now. Instead of my data now, it is my data 2 now. Look at what will happen. By the time I go back to Power BI and I perform a refreshing on this by going to Home and go to Preview, and I say refresh this, you will notice an error. An error has occurred. This error occurred because Power BI was attempting to refresh my data, which is here. But look at it now. But what it recognized it as originally was, if you go to data source settings, it only recognized it as my data. So it went straight to the source, looking for my data file. It cannot see it again. And all it has to tell us is that there is error. Data source error. Could not find the file, my data. So that becomes a problem. So how do we correct such errors? To correct such errors, we need to come to data source setting, and now we have to go to change source, because the source has been changed. So change source. And when we click on change source, we will have to browse to the new renamed file. We'll click on browse and we navigate to the desktop, to the new renamed file, then click on open and you can see it activated here and we'll click OK. And once we click OK, we can now click on close. Having done that, we've corrected it now. So when we go back again and click on refresh preview, you will notice that it will refresh it and the error has gone. That's quite amazing. This is one of the exploratory moves you must know. You see, I told you that Power BI is not about creating visuals. The main work is in the exploratory processes, and you are being able to clean the data and transform the data. Data visualization is the simplest aspect of what we're going to deal with, even though that seems to be the real analysis step by some persons. But that is not for me. For me, you need to understand how to go in and go out, because at times the data set that I'm giving to you will be quite dirty, and you begin to battle with this. Another thing that you have to realize about this is, just as you have this here, if I drag this into a folder, Power BI class, it means that I've removed it from the path that Power BI knew it for. Power BI recognizes that this file is directly on the desktop, but I've dragged this inside a folder now. So you can double click to see the file inside the folder. Once again, a problem will occur. And that problem will be that if I want to refresh again, if I click here to refresh preview, an error will occur again. Data source error again. And what is the cause of this error? That the location is no longer being recognized. So what do we do again? We go to data source setting again, and when we get there, we will have to navigate by clicking on change source and navigate to the new location of the file, browse. The new location of the file is in Power BI class. Here is the Power BI class. Look at it. I double click to open it, and I will select it and click open. By so doing, you will notice that Power BI has recognized that the file has entered into a folder. Then I will close it. Then if I click on refresh again, you will notice that the error will go. That's quite amazing. Please, once again, pause the video. And when you pause the video, try to practice what I've just done again. Don't just watch me, do it with me. That is the only way you will learn. And also try to do my exercises. If you do my exercises at the end of this course, you will be able to handle any kind of analysis in Power BI. And I assure you, we will explore Power BI to the point that nothing will absolutely remain. So pause the video and go through this again as we continue the class. Now, the next thing we're going to look at is what we call data profiling. Data profiling. This is a very important exercise that every data analyst using Power BI must perform. Now, if you, from this query editor now, if you click on the View tab, you will notice three important options under data preview. That is the column profile, you have the column distribution, and the column quality. This is column quality, this is column distribution, and this is column profile. Profiling tools like column quality, column distribution, and column profile allows you to explore the quality, the composition, and the distribution of your data before loading it into your Power BI front end. Now remember, we are in the query editor, an environment where we prepare our data, we transform it, and we clean it before we load it into the Power BI front end, which is the model view. Now, but before you load your data or your queries in the model view, please always try to profile them. Profiling the data will help you to have a good understanding of three major things: your column qualities. Each of these columns you are looking at now, you need to know their qualities, and you need to know their distributions, and you need to know how they are profiled. Now, what is column quality and what does it help us to do? Column quality helps us to show the percentage of values within a column that are valid or that contains errors or that are empty. These three things. What percentage of my column contains errors? What percentage is empty? And what percentage is valid? Let's try it up on this data table. If I check this box behind column quality, you will notice that I have a box here, which is the column quality box. You will see three options: valid, error, empty. It's telling me now that in this name column, that all the options here, all the entries here are valid. You have 100% valid. Error, 0, so no error here. Empty, no one is empty. Let's try city, the same thing. Age, the same thing. Now, let's uncheck it. Can we go to cells 2020? Let us check the column quality. Checking column quality should be an activity you perform after all your analysis or after all your cleaning and transformation, or even before then. Try to find out your column qualities. That will help you to know which columns have errors, which columns has invalid entries and what percentage, and which columns have empty entries. Now let's look at this now. Let's select column quality. You notice that other quantity we have 100%, no error, no empty, and the rest of them. Let's check out the next table. The same thing, you can see, you can scroll down to check the same thing, showing that it's perfect. Let's check the next, the combined one, the same thing, 100%. So at this point, I have all my columns valid at 100%, no error, no empty entry. So this table is fit enough to be loaded into the data model. Another thing that you might want to know is what we call column distribution. Column distribution has much to do with how certain things are distributed, how some things are distributed. For instance, now, we have cells 2021. Let me uncheck this, and I click on column distribution. You will notice that you can see how your tables are distributed. In the first column, you have 114 distinct values, and none of them is unique. 114 distinct values, and none of them is unique. In the stock date, you have 194 distinct, 27 is unique. You can go on and on to check to see your column distribution. So column distribution provides a sample distribution of the data in a column. When you hover over the column, you will see where you can make some changes. And that is quite amazing. I'd like you to pause the video briefly and go through what you've said before we continue. So the next thing we're going to look at is the column profile. Let's uncheck the column distribution and we'll click on the column profile. Column profile, you see that each column you select, the profile will be displayed under and the summary of that column will be displayed. For instance, from the sales data set 2021, I selected the product keys. The product key shows us how the products were sold. And from here, you can see that we have 1,000 products, no error, no empty. That it has given us the summary like we expected. Count 1,000 entries, no error, no empty, 16 to 31. That shows that we have 31 distinct products, no unique, and the rest of them. You can see the maximum product key, the minimum product key, and all that are required. And then you can see it. Now, this, when you look at, let's look at the other quantity. From the other quantity, you can see the summary of the other quantity. It counted it is 1,000, and eventually we have the distributions here. Go to customer key. We are going to look at this. The meaning of this might not come out so clearly here, but as we go on, we will look at it. The column profile provides a more holistic view of the data in a column, including a sample distribution and a proofing statistics. So it gives you a sample distribution and a proofing statistics. This is just a very simple one, and I believe it goes very clear. So with this, we will be ending this section, and as we continue, we will see more about Power BI. Take time to pause the video, take time to move around Power BI, try to get used to what is going on in Power BI, understand the logic behind Power BI, get accustomed to every aspect of it as we move on. So I'd like you to pause the video again and go through well as we continue. Now let's end our today's class by taking one or two exercises. I would like you to do these exercises and make sure it gets to me through our platform. And in this exercise, the first one will be, you are going to open an Excel worksheet. Open an Excel worksheet. And inside the Excel worksheet, I want you to assume that you are performing a registration that is taking place in about 12 states. In about 12 states of Nigeria, or maybe let's assume the registration is taking place in the 5 eastern states: Anambra, Imo, Abia, Ebonyi, and Enugu. And you're going to use the table with the following headers. You have first name, you have last name, you have phone number, you have email, you have age, you have marital status, and possibly 2 or 3 other headings. Try to register or enter about 10 names in this particular table. After you do that, save it on your desktop. Save it on your desktop with the name of the state. And by the time you are done, each state, you register 10 persons. Each state, you register 10 persons. Then, when you're done with that, go to Power BI. Connect those 5 tables to Power BI and append them together in such a way that you will have the 5 tables showing, and then the appended query. You have the 5 queries you connected, then you have the appended query that will contain a combination of the 10 queries. And once you do that, save it in Power BI and send it to the platform, to the Power BI platform by WhatsApp. So you're going to have 5 tables. Possibly the 5 tables can be saved inside a folder called Southeast. Save it inside a folder called Southeast and eventually forward it to me to see it. So please try and practice well. In our previous lectures, I've given series of exercises and I'm here to get feedback on them. I would like you to please cooperate, send me the feedbacks and let me know where you have challenges so we can continue. So till we meet in our next class by tomorrow or soonest, try to go through our lectures and we will continue. So that is awesome for the day. Bye-bye for now.